What's going on, YouTube, and welcome to Goal Line Hockey. It's Kevin Forte, and today we are taking a look at the Arizona Coyotes. What is the long-term future? What is the short-term future of the franchise? A lot of questions after their no vote passed. A lot of stuff going on in Arizona. Obviously the lack of a market is definitely quite concerning for the Coyotes in Arizona. So we're going to discuss some of that today. So if you want to look, I already made a video talking about Salt Lake City and how that could potentially be an option on the table for the Coyotes. But I think for most of the Coyotes fans out there, they still want to see, is there still a path in Arizona? And I think we need to discuss this because this is something that, I remember back in, what was it, 2015, 2013, something like that. The New York Islanders were trying to renovate the land that the Nassau Coliseum is on. It was called the Lighthouse Project. It didn't go through. It was taxpayer money. It was eerily similar to the Coyotes situation right now. And it failed through. So the Islanders had to go into Brooklyn and play at the Barclays Center for a few seasons. We all know how that went. But when everybody said the Islanders were destined for Quebec, when we had people from Quebec coming down to the Coliseum saying we want the team in Quebec, you had Kansas City as a really potential option. The Islanders found a short-term home, and they were able to find their long-term home. And in New York, it is very difficult as well to get buildings put up, right? I mean, you just consider the New York area, right? You've got Coliseum, which actually will be getting knocked down, the Garden, the Prudential Center right in New Jersey, right in Newark, Barclays Center. There's a lot of stuff going on. And now you add Belmont to that. There's a lot going on, but the Islanders were able to find a way to get it done. But there was also this sense of ownership really wanted to keep a team there. And that was a huge part of the Islanders being able to stay on Long Island. So to say it's all doom and gloom for the Coyotes, I'm a little bit more optimistic than that because I've seen it personally with my team. They were supposed to leave, and they didn't. So we're going to take a look at some of the options still available for the Coyotes. Is it too late? That's going to be a question that still has to be answered, but there is still hope. Now, we have to start off with, I'm looking at this article here from AZ Central, Jeremy Clough, basically kind of giving the idea that there are other options. And, on Arizona Coyotes Twitter, they said, we want to hear from you. Where should the Coyotes build their new home? And the four options were Gilbert. I don't know if I'm saying that right. It's either Gilbert or Jabert, Chandler, Mesa, which is the Mesa Mall, and Scottsdale. Now, I guess you guys could assume if you're from Arizona, 69.2% of the voting went to Scottsdale. And this is no surprise because the team has played in Scottsdale, Arizona in the past. But again, there's been some arena problems, and the fact that the Coyotes don't own the arena is a part of the reason why the Coyotes have not gone back to Scottsdale. And I believe that's also where the Phoenix Suns play, where they'd have to find some kind of agreement with the Phoenix Suns to play in their building. And I made this in my other video where I talked about this, where the problem is, too, with the Coyotes is, the NHL since the 96 lockout has really been putting more of a focus on NHL teams owning their buildings. That's been a huge push for the NHL, and for the most part, they've been able to do that. Obviously, some exceptions to the rule, like the Islanders when they were in Barclays Center. That was the Brooklyn Nets Stadium, not meant for the Islanders. And this would be something similar to that with the Phoenix Suns. Now, this would be a short-term option, I would assume. This isn't something you want to have forever. But the only problem I have with this is if this is all it took, they would have done this already, right? Like, I would think that Xavier Gutierrez and the ownership there in Arizona would have done their due diligence to talk to the Phoenix Suns about potentially working an agreement out. Or even the Phoenix Suns just straight out buying the Coyotes. That could have also been an option. So if they were going to go down that route, I would have thought they would have done that already, right? So what other options do they have other than Scottsdale? Which I know people want them in Scottsdale. But let's say their second best option, which also got a significant amount of the voting, and at 15.5% is Mesa. Now you may be wondering to yourself, why Mesa? What does Mesa have anything to do with this? Basically, it's the Mesa Mall. Mesa Mall has been kind of an attractive option here because of the idea that, this is a similar situation to Tempe in the sense that there is a market there, right? You're not just putting this team on an Indian reserve in the middle of nowhere. So I think that's definitely something to look at. But even Chandler and Gilbert, I'm not from Arizona, so I'm not really sure how to pronounce that. But I think for the most part, those are the two options they're going to be focusing on before they look outside of the state, which I think at this point is really a last option. And the thing is, you look at these areas, and I've seen this with New York, is when you have a lot of money in these areas, a lot of the time the taxpayers in those areas want to avoid having a massive stadium in their neighborhood. And that's kind of something that when you start going into suburban America, there's some really nice areas out in Arizona that I actually want to visit, right? Glendale, Scottsdale, there's a lot of money over there. And the problem is when those people that are like the middle to, the higher middle class, they're not necessarily interested in having a huge amount of traffic on their way home from work at 5, 6 o'clock for a 7 p.m. West Coast time game for the Coyotes. That's not really feasible. And I think that's something that even happened here for the Islanders, was there was a lot of proposals to put the team out on Long Island, right? And a lot of that was blocked because of the money from the local residents. They just wanted nothing to do with it. And there was no pitch that was going to work. And that was part of the issue here for the Coyotes. And the other part of it, too, for the Coyotes was the demographic. There's a lot of older people in that area in Tempe. And they don't want to see, similar to the situation with the Islanders, they don't want to see some massive building in the middle of their town. And that's a big problem that we've started to see with the Coyotes. If you're not in a city, it's very difficult to get those buildings built, right? And the Islanders were able to find a way to get it done in Belmont. But, they even with that, even if there is land in Arizona, what if another team throws out a bid? There was a soccer team that put a bid out. They're actually going to move next to Citi Field where the Mets play. But they were in consideration for getting the Belmont Park land. So a soccer stadium could have been there, and the Islanders would be playing somewhere else more than likely. So things have to fall your way. You have to have a couple dominoes fall your way, but it is possible for the Coyotes to stay. Now with that said, I'm going to make an entire video about expansion and relocation in other cities. I already talked about Salt Lake City, but what about the players? Because we heard about from, I believe it was Clayton Keller's dad had posted on Twitter saying he doesn't want his, Clayton's not going to be on this roster next season and this and that. That's not going to happen. Apparently, I think he did tweet that stuff out, but apparently his account got hacked or something like that. I don't know how much I really believe that, but I think it's more the idea of there's a lot of frustration in the organization, and I totally get that. I think a lot of that is valid and fair. So what does that come to? Could we see the Coyotes potentially shutting down and suspending operations? That will not be happening. There's too much money involved. Even in a smaller stadium, for the NHL to not get that revenue for an entire year is a huge loss and is not good for the NHL salary cap. It really sucks for the players, and I totally understand that. But the NHL would have think of it this way. When the NHL expands, right? The NHL wants to expand because there's going to be there's a bigger pool of money in the market. So think of it this way. Let's say the salary cap is $90 million, right? It's been that way before. $90 million. Now you have an expansion franchise that gives the NHL $90 million. Boom. That's $90 million just added into your league. So that's why the NHL likes expanding. Yes, it's good for the game. It's good for growing in other hockey markets. Absolutely. But it's also $90 million you just got. That's a big deal. And that's $90 million that now contracts are going to go up around the league because there is more money in the pool. So that's something that the NHL will not sacrifice for no reason, right? They're not going to just take a team out. And it's also a really bad look for the league, especially Gary Bettman, because that's one of his babies is the Arizona Coyotes. So he's going to do everything possible to keep that team there. And I think that right now for the Coyotes, there is that sense that maybe there is a lot of uncertainty, and it's going to be difficult for them in the summer, probably trying to get free agents. Logan Cooley, who was a Coyotes draft pick, is going to be coming back to Minnesota for his sophomore season. He will not be coming to the Coyotes, and that's kind of the trickle-down effect of this issue, but I don't see the team shutting down operations. It's not feasible. And there's just too much money involved. It's not going to happen. So with that out of the way, what do you guys think of the Arizona Coyotes situation? Are you genuinely concerned that this team will not be playing in Arizona? Do you think they'll be playing in Salt Lake? Do you think they'll play in Houston? Sacramento's come up as an option. I want to hear your guys' thoughts down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys again next time.